Today we're going to make some really wonderful Greek cookies. They're walnut honey dipped cookies, Melomacarona. They're fabulous, usually served around Christmas time, but you can make them anytime for a special occasion. They're a little time consuming, but they make a whole lot and the effort is really worthwhile. They're the kind of thing that's just perfect if you're planning a party or a buffet, something like that, because this recipe makes an awful lot, but it can be made ahead. In fact, the cookies taste better if they've stood for at least a day. So they're a wonderful addition to any kind of a dessert cookbook, and I'd love to share this recipe with you. It's one of my family recipes. And just a reminder, you can find this recipe and all the recipes I've been using on our website, Tweeton.com. Please look us up. You'll find not only the recipes, but ways to order video packages so that you can have these lessons at home for your own use. And also, there's links to other Greek sites that you might find interesting. Sites that will give you more insight into the Greek culture and, of course, a lot more different recipes. And be sure to email me if you have any comments or questions. I really love to hear from people who've been watching this show. And if you feel you have a time-honored family traditional recipe you'd like to share with me, I'd love to hear that and hear about it, and you can email the recipe to me. But let's get on to this recipe. This is really a good recipe to keep in your dessert folder. Melomacarona has three distinct components. It has the cookie, it has the syrup, and then it has the crushed walnuts that you sprinkle on top of the cookie. To make Melomacarona, you need the following ingredients. You need at least 3 eggs. You need some oil, and this time it should be vegetable oil. Olive oil was traditionally used in Greece, but it adds that olivey flavor to the cookies. So for we Greek Americans, we prefer to use a clear vegetable oil, or the very lightest grade of olive oil. You need some melted butter, some orange juice. Of course, you need flour. For leavening, you need baking powder. And for flavoring the cookie, you need some cinnamon and some nutmeg. Now, the cookie itself does not have a lot of sugar or sweetening in it because it's soaked in a honey syrup. So this is what you need for the syrup. You definitely need honey. You need some sugar. And you need the juice of half a lemon, or its equivalent. And then to top everything off, you need at least 2 cups of very finely ground walnuts. That's it. Let's get started on the first step for making these delicious cookies. The first thing I want to do is get my butter melted. This is a 1/2 cube or 1/4 cup of pure butter. And I'm just going to melt it and get it ready. Melt it in the microwave. To make the Melomacarona, you're going to need 2 big bowls. 1 big bowl to start out with, and you're going to put your liquid ingredients in here. So into this bowl will go the butter that I just melted. It was 1/4 cup or 1/2 cube. To this, you want to add 1/4 cup of orange juice. The cookie has a slight orange flavor. To this, you want to add 3 eggs and beat them up. Okay, that's good enough. And for sweetening, an unimaginably small 1 tablespoon of honey. Now don't get worried. That's not all the honey that's going to be in the final cookie. But this is the cookie base, and it really just doesn't need a whole lot of sweetening because it's going to be soaked in a honey sugar syrup. And believe me, the honey sugar syrup will take care of all your sweet needs. Now this is a rich cookie, and you're going to see why it's so rich this next step. You're going to need 1 3/4 cup vegetable oil. That's right, 1 3/4 cup. This is a rich, rich cookie. Not only does it have a lot of oil in it, it has all that honey sugar syrup, and of course this is a typical Greek dessert. These kinds of things, like baklava, like kouroubiyedes, they were not intended to be eaten every day for a little lunchtime snack or an evening after supper dessert. They were for special occasions. They were usually made at the most once or twice a year. And so Greek people felt, well, sure, they would splurge, they would indulge on a special occasion, but they didn't indulge all the time. A normal after dinner dessert was just something simple like fruit. But this kind of cookie is for a very special occasion, at Christmas time, or as I said, for buffets, something like that. Something where you really want to impress people. It's not your typical everyday munching type cookie. So just add the oil to the egg and orange juice mixture and incorporate it as best you can. We have all our liquid ingredients combined. Now it's time to take care of the dry ingredients. And let's get started with the flavorings. How about 1/4 teaspoon each of cinnamon and nutmeg? If it's a little over, that's okay. This cookie is going to have just a slight hint of cinnamon along with a slight hint of orange. It won't be overpowering though. And 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. For leavening, you need 2 tablespoons of baking powder. And be sure that the baking powder is fresh so that the cookies will rise as much as they're supposed to. And although the recipe calls for 5½ to 6 cups of flour, I'm just going to add 4 cups of flour to this bowl. Get everything all mixed in and then start incorporating it into the wet ingredients. So I'm going to be using 4 cups of flour. And if you've been watching this show for any length of time, you know I don't have an official flour canister. What I have is a 3-pound coffee canister from years and years ago that I've been using for almost as long as I've been married. Now I want to just, with this first cup of flour, make sure that I incorporate not only the seasonings, the cinnamon and the nutmeg, but especially the baking powder. And I want to do the same thing with the second cup of flour. Put it in and make sure it's completely mixed up so that the baking powder is all throughout it. And the same with the third and the fourth cup. Now the reason I don't want to go any further with adding flour to this mixture is because I really don't know how much flour I'm going to end up using. Depending on the amount of moisture in the flour that I might have, depending on a lot of different factors, I could be using anywhere from 5 to 6 cups of flour. That's why I have to get this incorporated, dig my fingers in, and kind of go by feel. So I don't want to overdo the flour that's mixed with the baking powder. Okay, this is incorporated, and it's time for me to just start adding it to the liquid ingredients. If you wanted to, you could use an electric mixer, but I'll tell you honestly, the electric mixer will only take you so far. After a few cups of flour, you're going to have to stop and use a big spoon, and eventually even the spoon's not going to work. You have to get in there with your hands. So I'm just going to add a little bit of the flour at a time, flour mixture at a time, incorporating it into the oil and egg mixture. And just keep doing this until I've used up the 4 cups that I made. The end result will be a soft, pliable, very, very rich dough. Okay, I'm just about to the point where I'm going to have to make the switch from the whisk to the big spoon. And I put in the last of the flour that I seasoned with the cinnamon and nutmeg, and that has the baking powder in it. The idea here is I'm going to incorporate at least 1 more cup of flour, maybe up to 2 cups of flour. I want a soft, pliable dough that does not stick to my fingers and does not stick to the sides of the bowl. So here goes the 5th cup of flour. And this is where I want to watch it carefully. I don't want to get too stiff of a dough. This is not supposed to be dry. So I don't want to add any more additional flour until I've really incorporated all this 5th cup. And it's at this point that you might want to just give up on the spoon altogether and dig in with your hands. Of course, your hands are clean. But I'm a die-hard. I'm going to keep working with this spoon as long as I can. I'm looking at this dough and trying to decide what I want to do. It's very rich. It's oily, at least my hand's greasy. It's soft. It's pliable. I think maybe I'll put in just 1/2 cup more flour. I don't want to make it too stiff, because then it's not short. It's not crumbly. It'll just be this huge log thing. So I'll put in about 1/2 cup more flour, and I think that I'll call it quits at that. That last cup of flour is the one you have to kind of play with. I'm going to incorporate this with the spoon, try and get all the flour in there. And the idea, as I said before, is for a soft, pliable dough that doesn't stick to your fingers, doesn't stick to the sides of the bowl, but that is soft. Whatever you do, go over 6 cups. All right, let's look at that. I'm going to get my fingers in here. All right, this is still a soft dough. It's definitely pliable. So we're done with the dough, and now it's on to shaping the cookies. I don't know what was going on in my brain. I forgot to put my apron on. It's just a miracle I didn't get flour all over me. Now we're ready to shape the cookies and put them on a baking sheet. The baking sheet should be ungreased. Obviously, with a cookie this rich, all this oil, you certainly don't need to grease the pan. But for good measure, I'm going to put some parchment paper on my cookie sheets. And you can find parchment paper at any local grocery store. And it really does help. Okay, what you need to do with the dough is you need to get a wad of dough that's about a 2-inch ball, approximately, and just make a ball in your hand with it, and then shape it into kind of an oval shape and put it on your cookie sheet. Keep them separated about 2 inches apart. Melomacarona are traditionally oval shaped, and they're flattened. You can either flatten them with the heel of your palm, or you can flatten them using a fork. So they're little flat oval cookies. So you just keep taking 2-inch balls of dough, and it will be kind of crumbly. It'll be very oily. Don't worry about that. Shape them into an oval, about 2 inches apart. Flatten them a bit. Fingertips, heel of the palm, or a fork, and keep doing that until you fill one baking pan. Now this is one dough that probably doesn't taste really good raw because there's not a whole lot of flavor to it. The flavor comes after the cookie's been soaked. This is a famous Christmas type cookie, and it can be found usually at most Greek restaurants, and especially at the Greek festivals. And speaking of Greek festivals, you know, in the Sacramento area, every Labor Day, there's a huge Greek festival at the Sacramento Convention Center. And I certainly would encourage anybody who's interested in eating Greek food to go there, because not only can you eat the food there right on the spot, but you can get plates to go of some of the delicious entrees like roast lamb and shish kebab, that kind of thing, and you can get boxes of some of these wonderful Greek desserts. So be sure to watch your newspaper for ads for the Greek festival every Labor Day weekend in Sacramento. Okay, this sheet is ready, and I'm going to get it ready to put in the oven. Now I'm just going to place these in a 350-degree preheated oven for about 25 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. I want the cookies to just get light brown, that's all. It's been 25 minutes. I'm going to take the cookies out of the oven. You can see they're a nice golden brown. They haven't puffed up too much. This amount of dough, depending on how large you make the cookies, can make anywhere from 3 dozen to 4 dozen. While the rest of the cookies are baking, I'm going to get started working on the syrup. For the syrup, I need 1 1/2 cups of honey. I'm using the same measuring cup that I poured out the oil in, and I haven't wiped the oil out, and this will help the honey come out a little easier. Okay, 1 1/2 cups of honey. You can see that using the same measuring cup that I'd used for the oil really helped. The oil coating made it so much easier for the honey just to plop out with it, meaning having to dig through it with a spatula and that kind of thing. Now we've got the 1 1/2 cups of honey. To this, I want to add 2 cups of granulated sugar. And I think you can understand why we didn't need a whole lot of sweetening in the cookie itself. With all this sugar and all this honey, there's going to be plenty of sweetness in the cookie once they've been dipped and soaked in this stuff. And I need the juice of 1/2 lemon. I don't have a fresh lemon on me this morning, so I'm using lemon juice concentrate, whatever the equivalent would be for the juice of 1/2 lemon. And finally, 1 1/2 cups of water. Now you may wonder, why am I making a syrup in a sauté pan? Well, the reason is simple. When it comes time to dip the cookies, I'm going to want to get as many cookies in at a time as I can. So I need a very wide surface, and this saucepan, or this I should say sauté pan, gives me just what I want. It's wide. I can put at least 8 cookies in here at a time, and it's still deep enough for me to cook the syrup, and that's what I need to do right now. What I want to do is, first of all, blend all the ingredients, get the sugar dissolved. I want to turn this on a high heat. I want to bring this to a boil and stir it while it's coming up to a boil so that all the sugar will dissolve and the honey will combine well with the water. Once the syrup comes to a boil, just turn the heat way down and let it simmer for just about 5 minutes. You aren't making candy here. It doesn't really need to thicken. All you want to do is just make sure that everything's dissolved and that it has been heated. So just about 5 minutes of a simmer, and then that's it. You can turn the heat down, turn it off altogether. Now it's time to give our attention to the walnuts. We need about 2 cups of finely ground walnuts. So that's what I'm going to take care of right now. I'm using my little food processor to grind the walnuts, and I do want them finely ground so that they'll adhere to the cookie. Since this isn't exact science here, I'm going to just take a cup of halved walnuts, put them in my food processor, and give it a whirl. Here goes. Right, this is the consistency I want. I really want it finely ground, and the reason for this, when the cookies are still moist and kind of wet from the syrup, that's when the walnuts are applied, and if they're more finely ground, they'll stick, they'll adhere to the cookie better. So this is the consistency we're looking for. I'm going to do another cup. I'm taking one of my large pans, I'm going to line it with wax paper. And this will be the pan to receive the cookies. All right, I've got everything ready. Chopped nuts, baked cookies, and syrup. Warm cookies. Cookies go into the syrup. As many as can fit in one layer. And now you can see why it's nice to have something like this saute pan, because I can fit quite a few cookies in at a time. If I was using a small saucepan, I'd only be able to do just 3 or 4 at a time. I've got almost an entire dozen in here. These cookies are still slightly warm. They haven't cooled completely. The syrup is still very warm. I want the cookies to soak at least 1 minute, up to 2 minutes, but no longer than 2 minutes. If they soak too long, they'll just fall apart. So I'm just going to soak these for about 2 minutes here. And I'll set my timer just to remind me. While the cookies are soaking, you can be sure that you push them down so the tops get into the syrup too. This syrup can be reused. When you're all done with this set of cookies, you can strain it and keep it in the refrigerator or in a cool, dry place and reuse it for some more Melomacarona, or maybe for some caridopita, or any time you would want a honey flavoring to something. With a slotted spoon, take the cookies out and lay them on a surface, a cookie sheet, a baking sheet that has been lined with wax paper. And while the cookies are still moist from the syrup, this is when you want to apply the nuts. Just take some of those finely ground walnuts and sprinkle them all over the cookies. just to make it sure that each cookie has some walnuts, press them down a little bit. Press them down lightly so that they stick. And if you find bare spots, just add a little bit. Now these cookies are delicious and they're very tempting, but they really need to stand overnight. If they stand overnight, what happens is all that wonderful syrup just is sucked up and absorbed by the cookie itself. These are wonderful cookies. They're very, very moist. They last a long time, and they're wonderful to make ahead for a special dinner or special party. Don't these look really pretty? Hey, hey, hey! That's for dessert tonight. For those of you out there, try these wonderful honey nut mounds. They're delicious cookies. You won't regret making them, and you certainly won't regret eating them.